Welcome to Nightmares Incorporated, where our goal is to make your sleep anything but restful. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the finale to the Precursors. The following is a recording of the debriefing of Daniel Mears, conducted by Special Agent Charles Miller, 14 days after the fall of Fort Dyer. Today is September 10th, 2025. This is Agent Miller speaking. With me is Daniel Mears, a reporter for the Bridgeton Gazette, and one of the 75 survivors rescued from Fort Dyer during the Battle of Bridgeton. Good afternoon, Mr. Mears. I trust you slept well. You're looking a little better today. Mr. Mears, I understand that you probably don't want to talk to me, and I'm aware that you resisted the soldiers during your rescue, but you were on the roof with the others. That tells me that you wanted to live. Yet I'm told that you haven't been eating, and since you arrived here in the safe zone, you've barely slept. I understand survivor's guilt, and I am sympathetic to everything you've been through, as I read the editorial that you released before the attack on Fort Dyer. But you have to talk to me eventually, Mr. Mears. There's hope that you may have information that can help us. Bridgeton is gone, sir, as is most of the east coast of the United States. Over the past week, these things that identified themselves as Shoggoth in Dr. Richards' recording have begun moving into Canada and down into Mexico as they continue to also spread west into the United States. It is predicted that they are also moving through the oceans and will soon surface in other countries as well. Just talk to me, Mr. Mears. What the fuck do you want me to say? You read my report. You listened to the recording. You know as much as I do. How do you expect me to help? You should have rescued someone else and left me there. But, Mr. Mears, you were on the roof. I was on the roof because I've learned that running from literal fucking monsters is an instinct that can't be ignored. There's nothing more I can tell you that I didn't already include in my article. And survivor's guilt? Do you really understand that? Were you at Fort Dyer? I've seen the aerial footage that was taken during the rescue, and the body cam footage that was recovered from some of the soldiers involved in said rescue. But no, I was not there personally, so I can't imagine. No, you can't imagine. Did you see how they poured over the wall like it wasn't even there? How once they broke in, they dissolved people alive, tore them apart with their teeth, and flung them around like they were dolls? Do you have any idea what it's like to hear the screams of all those people, and the roars of abominations that seem solely driven by xenophobic hatred? Survivor's guilt doesn't quite cover it. I would have been satisfied to die on that roof. I ran because that's what you do. That's all you can do when you see one of them. I can't help you. I disagree, Mr. Mears, and I'm genuinely sorry for what you experienced at Fort Dyer and during the days prior to the attack. But I don't think you understand how important you may be. You can offer something that cannot be fully translated into a written article. You are the only person who has come into contact with one of these things and actually spoken to it. Also, as a reporter who has spent years interviewing people, you can offer an impression about the thing that you spoke to. And how is that going to help anyone? Why do you think it let you live, Mr. Mears? In your opinion, were you speaking to Dr. Richards? From what I gathered from listening to the recording, it seems as if there are two minds at work there. Do you think we can negotiate with him? No offense, but are you out of your fucking mind? Negotiate for what? You listen to that recording. You see what's going on out there. What makes you think we can reason with them? Because Dr. Richards let you live. Why do that? He didn't have to. There's no reason to have allowed you to share the information that you had, let alone the contents that were on his recording. Maybe that's what he meant by saying that this one is still very human. Maybe there is a human element left within Dr. Richards that we could reason with. Maybe even negotiate a truce. It would seem that he has an element of control over the others. They gave you safe passage, correct? Mr. Mears? Mr. Mears, hold on. I think I know why it let me live. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. It's why I wish they left me on that rooftop. Please elucidate. It let me live to spread fear. In hindsight, that's all my article did. And it let me have the recording because it doesn't consider us a threat. It doesn't care if we know where they came from. It believes there's nothing we can do to stop them. And Dr. Richards isn't there anymore. Not really. Not any more than he has control over anything. They are all one thing. That's what I think. Every single one of those shambling horrors originated from the same batch of cells drawn from Adler. The same cells that infected Richards. They are all one being. One mind. Maybe that will change as they breed, as Richards stated in his recording. But for now, we are facing one creature that is divided into hundreds of thousands of forms, all of them likely containing the memories of the people that they originated from. That's all it is. The Richards thing recognized me. And considering that this thing thinks it's the only pure life form on Earth, I think it was just pure narcissism that wanted me to tell its story. And I did. I did exactly what it wanted. Those are the impressions I got. Like I said, I can't help you. You already are, Mr. Mears. It's important that we understand the enemy as best we can. Fort Dyer fell within a matter of hours. Bridgeton within a week. And as I said before, the enemy is advancing at a frightening pace, and the military is overwhelmed by performing the double duty of combat and evacuation of civilians. With you being the only person to have had verbal contact with the enemy, it was imperative for us to find out if you thought we could negotiate with them. I'm not going to lie, it's going bad out there, Mr. Mears. We are already planning an evacuation of the safe zone within the next few weeks if there's not a change in the war effort. Soon our backs will be against the Pacific Ocean. We need to know all options that are available to us. And what options are those? We are currently amassing enough napalm to blanket the evacuated cities to see if that can kill them permanently. As far as I understand, missiles don't hurt them, but I'll get more information here in the next few days as a survivor from Bridgeton is currently in transit. How many survivors from Bridgeton are there? From the reports I've received, 25 soldiers. Out of how many? 300 soldiers were sent to Bridgeton. There would have been more, but the enemy, as you know, surfaced in several areas of the East Coast at once. We were almost immediately caught off guard, and hundreds of soldiers were lost before we even knew we were at war. It appears that several military installations on the East Coast were targeted, as well as some of the largest cities. While we're still gathering all of the information, it appears as if this was a coordinated attack to establish a foothold that the enemy can spread out from, which is exactly what they have done. Are any other options being considered? Yes, you stated one yourself. Seriously? Yes, Mr. Mears. That's why your input is so important. If napalm doesn't stop them, and if we cannot find another way to fight them, then a nuclear option may be all that we have left. That's why I'm sharing confidential information with you, Mr. Mears. You need to understand fully what's at stake. I understand, sir. My honest opinion is that the thing I spoke to had no pity. There was nothing human about it. That thing let me go, but slaughtered the people I was with. In my article, I only stated that they could have made it quick, but chose not to. In reality, The people I was with screamed in the most agonizing pain I've ever heard for over 5 minutes. I never turned around to see what was happening. And honestly, I think that's the only reason I'm still partially sane. That was the only real message I took away from my meeting with that fucking abomination. There will be no negotiating with them. I appreciate your time and honesty, Mr. Mears. Can I call upon you if I have any further questions? I'm not going anywhere, so of course. Recording ends. Debrief of Private First Class Marcel Bolton, survivor of the Battle of Bridgeton, conducted by Special Agent Charles Miller. Today is September 14th, 2025. This is Agent Miller speaking. With me is Private First Class Marcel Bolton. Thank you for sitting down with me. I hope the trip wasn't too long. The trip was fine, sir, and I'm eager to answer any questions you have if you think it'll help. Good to hear, Private. Right now, I want you to walk me through what you remember from the Battle of Bridgeton. I've read the report, of course, but the committee that I represent believe that a report cannot compare to first-hand information. From what I understand, your platoon and one other were part of a splinter group that was broken off from Bellum Company, correct? Yes, sir. Our company was divided once the enemy was spotted emerging in several cities all at once. Half of Bellum was sent to aid in the defense of D.C., while we continued on to Bridgeton, Virginia. We arrived at 0600 on the 22nd of August, about 72 hours after the call for assistance from National Guard forces in over 5 American cities went out. We established a temporary FOB 3 miles north of where it was reported that the National Guard was engaging the enemy. We went in fast, as we had heard from the guard on the ground that the situation was desperate. They said they were on the back foot and had been retreating since the main part of the enemy force had encountered them. That most civilians were being evacuated to the south, while the guard and local police tried to lure the enemy to the north. It was easy to find our target, as there was scant gunfire to be heard as a few of the guard were still standing. Once we arrived, take your time, son. Do you need some water? No, I'm okay. It's just when we arrived, initially we froze. It was as if we had all forgotten while we were there. We had seen the enemy on video that was recorded via traffic copter after they began emerging, but seeing them on a screen was different. We see all sorts of things on screens now, don't we? Because of CGI and special effects, very little that can be shown on a screen can even provoke a reaction from most people these days. I don't know if you've seen them in person, sir, but it's different than seeing them on a video. Seeing them occupying the same physical space as you, it's like your mind can't accept what you're seeing. Or maybe it's just we can't make sense of it. They all look similar, but also different. And hardly anything you're seeing matches up with anything you can relate to. You see teeth, eyes, tentacles, all branching out from a central shape that keeps shifting and changing, moving like sentient water. The remaining members of the guard and a few local police were still retreating, moving towards us, hundreds of those things advancing towards them. We engaged once we regained our bearings, following the guard's example and moving backwards as we did so. Air support was called in 5 minutes after we encountered the enemy, as it was quickly determined the bullets didn't phase these things, didn't even slow them down. We soon learned that we had to watch our surroundings as well, as a smaller group of the enemy flanked our position while we were distracted by the main force. 24 soldiers died within minutes once we were flanked, and while we were still shooting, it soon became clear that our only option was to retreat until air support arrived and hope that a missile strike could damage these things. Airstrike finally came. 2 A-10 Thunderbolts. They let 2 off the chain, hitting the main force that was advancing on us dead center. The noise and shockwave were intense, even though we had retreated to a safe distance, but I don't think any of us minded. The A-10s made a wide circle, came back, and let loose 2 more into the spreading dust cloud.
We began to advance back toward the impact zone after maybe 20 minutes had passed, slightly optimistic given that there was no sound of the enemy. The dust was clearing out when we saw him. We called the fighters back to make another run and began to retreat again. The things had been blown apart by the missiles for sure, but the separate parts were moving on their own. They were changing. Many of them were elongating, turning into almost snake-like creatures with large mouths, and those same unsettling, almost human eyes covering their bodies. Others were grouping up, forming shapes that were larger than the ones they had before. When the A-10s came back around for another run, one of the larger creatures, a thing that was maybe 25 feet tall, although I can't imagine how that can even be possible, ejected some kind of black fluid towards one of them. It came out like a bullet, a wide stream of something viscous, striking one of the fighters directly. The pilot tried an evasive maneuver too late. The jet itself was covered in that substance as it flew overhead, and then it just burst into flames. I don't know how it ignited, or what that stuff was, and none of us stuck around to try and figure it out. We were in full retreat at this point. There was no way we could fight that thing that had emerged from the dust, and we had lost sight of the smaller ones as they had broken off from the main force and gone down a couple of side streets. We radioed the FOB that we were on our way back, that one fighter was down and the other was attempting another run. The snake-like things descended on us from the surrounding buildings. They were so fast, covering ground in insane leaps like they were made out of springs, clamping onto arms, legs, heads, overwhelming us in sheer numbers as the larger ones now advanced with renewed purpose. Soldiers were screaming, firing wildly, running, the things that pursued us roaring and also calling out to us in human voices. It's okay, son. Try to calm down. I can't imagine what that was like. Do you need a break? No. They killed most of us during the retreat. They don't always just absorb people. They were punching through us with limbs that were like spears. The snake things were tearing us apart with their teeth, and some of us swore afterwards that we saw the larger ones pausing over the mangled corpses of our brothers in arms and leaving some of that black viscous substance on their bodies. I don't know why they would do that, or even if we actually saw it. We were all mostly delirious by the time we reached the evac point. It had only been 6 hours since we arrived. 6 hours, and over 200 soldiers dead. We were lifting off as they swarmed over the FOB. They were now moving like ants after their hive has been disturbed. And in the center of the pack, I saw the behemoth that had taken down one of the A-10s. It looked like a whale that had suddenly learned how to walk on land. There's probably more in the report, but that's about it from my perspective. Or at least that's all I can remember. When it came down to it, we were facing an enemy that seemed impervious to anything we tried. Our bullets were no more effective than if we had been shooting into the goddamn ground. An enemy that came at us with absolutely no fear or hesitation. It was like fighting a wave. Thank you, Private. I appreciate you reliving that to give me your observations. I'm very sorry to hear about the comrades you lost, and I thank you for your service. Can I call on you again if needed? Yes, sir. Anything I can do to help.
Private note made by Special Agent Charles Miller following the Bolton debriefing. The substance that Private First Class Marcel Bolton described is concerning, and especially the detail of it being left behind on the bodies of the fallen. It reminds me of Mr. Mears' report of what the Richards thing he encountered in the sewers had said about his current companions. That parts of them would be used to grow new members of what it referred to as the Brood. At this time, we are still not sure how these creatures breed, but the very likely possibility that they can repurpose the bodies of dead humans, using our genetic material to make more of themselves, puts us in an even more desperate situation. Every fallen soldier or civilian on our side is possibly another addition to their forces. I will add this detail to my report as speculation based upon informed opinion for the time being. Unfortunately, this only bolsters the case for Operation Glass. I've heard that some samples taken from lake shores and sewers are on their way to different labs that have been set up in the Midwest. If true, I can only hope that they find something that can help us. Analysis of Shoggoth cells recovered from Brentwood, Tennessee. Investigative research on regenerative abilities and containment methods.
Introduction. The Shoggoth, the monstrous and enigmatic entity that surfaced from underneath Bridgeton, Virginia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York City, New York, Orlando, Florida, and Bangor, Maine on August 17, 2025, has become the focal point of intense scientific scrutiny considering the current threat that they pose not only to the United States, but the rest of the world. The cells of this creature, recovered from the battle outside of Brentwood, Tennessee, and hereafter referred to as Sample 1A, exhibit an array of extraordinary and troubling characteristics. The present research paper delves into the unique cellular properties of the Shoggoth and offers insight into any potential containment and neutralization methods. Cellular regeneration. One of the most striking findings in the examination of Shoggoth cells is their ability to regenerate at what should be an impossible speed. These cells exhibit a rapid division rate far beyond any known biological organism. When observed under laboratory conditions, it was noted that even after severe damage, the cells would repair themselves within seconds. Microscopic analysis revealed that the cells are capable of reconstructing their entire structure almost instantaneously, which renders traditional methods of incapacitation, such as gunfire or blunt force, ineffective. This regenerative capacity poses a significant challenge in efforts to neutralize the creature, as it can recover from injuries that would be fatal to most known life forms. Absorption of other cells. Further analysis revealed that Shoggoth cells have the unsettling ability to absorb other cells they come into contact with, subsequently growing larger. This absorptive process not only increases the mass of the Shoggoth, but also allows it to integrate the genetic material of the absorbed cells, potentially making it more adaptable and resilient than we initially thought. The study noted that when exposed to various types of genetic material, including plant and animal cells, the Shoggoth would engulf and assimilate them. This led to accelerated growth and increased complexity, with the Shoggoth sample adopting some of the characteristics of the absorbed cells. This ability to incorporate and utilize foreign genetic material suggests that the Shoggoth could become increasingly difficult to combat over time, as it may acquire new traits that enhance its already impressive survivability. Fire as a neutralizing agent. In the quest to find an effective countermeasure against the Shoggoth, fire emerged as a potential solution. Laboratory experiments demonstrated that prolonged exposure to high temperatures could neutralize the cells. However, the exposure must be sustained over a significant period to destroy the cells completely. Brief or intermittent exposure to fire resulted in temporary incapacitation, with the sample eventually regenerating once the heat source was removed. Detailed thermal imaging showed that the cells could withstand short bursts of heat, but continuous exposure over several minutes would cause irreversible damage. This finding suggests that while fire is effective, its practical application in the field would require measures to ensure continuous and thorough incineration. Devices capable of maintaining a consistent flame, such as flamethrowers or incendiary devices, would therefore be essential in combating the Shoggoth. Proposal for napalm use. Dr. Collins, one of the leading researchers on this project, proposed the use of napalm as a viable method to counteract the Shoggoth's regenerative abilities. Napalm, with its ability to generate and sustain intense heat over extended periods, could potentially ensure the complete destruction of Shoggoth cells. However, Dr. Collins emphasized the necessity of containing the Shoggoth within a confined area to maximize the effectiveness of the napalm and prevent the creature from escaping during the process. This containment could be achieved through strategic use of barriers or traps designed to restrict the Shoggoth's movement. Dr. Collins suggested deploying a combination of physical barriers, such as reinforced steel walls, and controlled chemical burns to perhaps keep the Shoggoth in place while the napalm is applied. He also recommended the use of remote-controlled delivery systems to minimize the risk to human operators. Mimicry of human cells. A disturbing development observed during the study was the Shoggoth cell's ability to mimic human cells when exposed to them. Instead of the expected engulfment and absorption, a portion of the sample began to imitate the structure and function of the human cells it came into contact with. This mimicry could potentially allow the Shoggoth to evade detection by blending in with human tissue, complicating efforts to identify and eliminate the creature. The implications of this mimicry are profound, suggesting that the Shoggoth possesses an adaptive mechanism that enables it to infiltrate human populations undetected. Dr. Collins noted that the mimic cells retained their Shoggoth characteristics at a molecular level, indicating that while they outwardly resembled human cells, they were still fundamentally different. What is unknown is whether this is an instinctive reaction, or if the Shoggoth have the intelligence to use this ability at will. According to the verbal record of Dr. Richards, they may be able to do just that, as he indicated he had learned to mask his deformed skin after his infection had proceeded far enough. In conclusion, the research on Shoggoth cells underscores the formidable nature of this creature and the challenges it poses to our understanding of biology and containment strategies. The regenerative capabilities, absorptive growth, and mimicry potential necessitate a multifaceted approach to develop effective countermeasures. Fire, particularly in the form of napalm, offers a promising avenue, but containment remains a critical factor in ensuring successful neutralization. The implementation of comprehensive containment protocols, combined with sustained incendiary treatment, could provide a viable strategy for dealing with Shoggoth threats. Continued research and collaboration across scientific disciplines are essential in unraveling the mysteries of the Shoggoth and safeguarding humanity from this existential threat. In regards to the proposal of Operation Glass, this team of researchers counsel that we hold off, as the fire might be able to push this conflict into our favor, or at the very least force a stalemate. While we understand the suggestion of Project Glass, we advise caution, as that is a decision that can never be reversed. References: private notes made by Special Agent Charles Miller following the Bolton debriefing. Research report on Sample 1A recovered from the field October 19, 2025. The voice recordings of Dr. Alan Richards.
Operation Report from General William Fargo, January 16, 2026.
This is General William Fargo with the United States military and the head of Operation Glass, giving an update on the ongoing war effort against the enemy known as the Shoggoth. This most recent report will provide a comprehensive overview of the ongoing military operations against the Shoggoth. This report will highlight the measures taken to reach a temporary stalemate, the inherent challenges posed by the enemy's evolving nature, and the global scope of the conflict. First of all, a temporary stalemate has been achieved through the strategic deployment of napalm, which has proven quite effective in countering the Shoggoth's regenerative abilities. Fires have been ignited from the Texas Panhandle to beyond the Canadian border, with both Mexico and Canada implementing similar measures to create a contiguous barrier of fire. This approach has temporarily halted the Shoggoth's advance, providing a critical reprieve for military forces to regroup and strategize further actions. However, despite the initial success of this strategy, I must emphasize that it is only a temporary measure. The resources required to sustain these extensive fires are immense and rapidly depleting. The logistics of maintaining such a widespread incendiary barrier are complex and unsustainable in the long term. This limitation underscores the urgency of finding a more sustainable solution to the Shoggoth threat. Efforts are currently underway to explore alternative methods of containment and neutralization, with a focus on minimizing resource expenditure while maximizing effectiveness. As many of you on the Council may know, on January 5th, reports confirmed that the Shoggoth had begun surfacing in Europe, Asia, and South America. The sudden appearance of the creatures in these regions was not wholly unexpected, and once the scope of the enemy force in the United States was understood, and the motive of the enemy was understood due to the Richards recording, the International Committee was established, with nations collaborating to share intelligence and coordinate defense efforts. Military alliances and joint task forces are being established to counter the Shoggoth spread. Projections indicate that they will also emerge in Australia by the end of the month. This development indicates a significant escalation in the conflict, as the Shoggoth now indeed pose a global threat, and have shown that they have the numbers to do so. And beyond that, there have been several disturbing developments. The Shoggoth emerging from the ocean are distinctly different from those that originated underground. These oceanic Shoggoth appear to have absorbed and assimilated marine life, resulting in grotesque mutations that defy conventional understanding of biology. These entities have been reported to possess features and abilities that differ significantly from their terrestrial counterparts. These new abominations exhibit traits and behaviors influenced by the various sea creatures they have integrated, displaying enhanced mobility, resilience, and adaptability. This evolution presents new challenges for the Allied forces, requiring the development of specialized tactics and equipment to address the unique threats posed by these mutated forms. Dr. Collins from Military Defense Research has observed that while the Shoggoth primarily target humans, they are capable of absorbing all life forms. Dr. Collins has postulated that this is the Shoggoth's attempt to, quote, reassemble themselves, potentially returning to their primordial form. Dr. Collins predicts that future mutations are to be expected as the creature continues to evolve and adapt. The implications of this adaptive process are profound, necessitating ongoing research to understand the underlying mechanism to try and develop effective countermeasures. The question is whether or not we will have the time to develop said countermeasures. In conclusion, I hope that this report presents a sobering assessment of the ongoing military efforts against the enemy. While the use of napalm has provided a temporary respite, the global scale of the threat and the Shoggoth's ability to mutate and adapt present a significant, possibly overwhelming challenge. At this stage, it is difficult to imagine a scenario where we can neutralize the enemy long enough to devise a strategy to defeat them. The enemy is relentless, nearly invulnerable to all conventional weapons, and is unequivocally seeking out the extermination of the human race. We will not give up the fight, however. We will continue to resist and try to outlast the enemy. This is a war of attrition, and so far, we are not on the winning side of it. On top of that, our options are already limited given the nature of the enemy. That is why I once again recommend Project Glass. Yet I leave that within the International Committee's hands, as that is not a decision that one person should be allowed to make. General William Fargo, January 16th, 2026.
Interview with Dr. Nathan Collins on March 30th, a week after the fall of the Institute of Cellular and Molecular Biology in Austin, Texas. Interview conducted by Special Agent Charles Miller.
This is Agent Miller. With me is Dr. Nathan Collins, the head of military research regarding the Shoggoth entity. Doctor, I don't mean to push you too hard considering what you've been through recently, but the committee needs some answers as to what took place on the night of March 23rd. So please excuse me if I seem abrupt or insensitive. I understand, Agent Miller. Seeing as we weren't the only site hit that night, and very few people got out, I can appreciate the committee's urgency. Did you receive the report on what they're calling birthing sites that were discovered last month? Yes, Doctor, I did. The first one was discovered by a team operating on the western side of Nebraska after the first breach in the firewall took place. They described an area within a cornfield that had been completely altered. The footage seemed to show a swamp that you would normally see in Florida or other more humid climates. But upon closer inspection, it was easy to see that the area was covered in that viscous substance many have reported secreting from these creatures. And what looked like water was an unknown liquid that gave off a stench so revolting that the team could not approach without breathing protection. Use of a drone realized a network of what could generously be described as fleshy vines that were approximately 2 feet in diameter, along with other mounds of organic matter that were unidentifiable. From the vines, however, we could clearly see what looked like organisms growing off of them like a tree that's budding. The team that captured and transmitted this footage was subsequently overwhelmed by Shoggoth, who must have been defending the area, and used the remaining surrounding corn as cover. There were no survivors. I am aware, Agent Miller. I saw the same recording. And a few days after that, another one was discovered on the other side of a breach in Texas. However, in this case, the team went in prepared due to the unfortunate loss of the soldiers in Nebraska. They brought SCBAs, flamethrowers, and the area was firebombed in a 2-mile radius before they went in. From this site, they retrieved a fresh sample that was brought to my lab. It was deemed of utmost importance to analyze this sample straight away, as up to that point we had not seen or known of these creatures breeding in the wild. I've been of the opinion for some time that the entities that we have been engaged in war with are little more than an imitation of the original Shoggoth. That what will be born in the wild will be far worse than anything we have seen so far. And if it's possible, even harder to understand or even hope to defeat. It's been my opinion that this first wave, while targeting us primarily, has also been gathering genetic information from every species they can. I think that's what these birthing sites are. A conglomeration of genetic material that grows into something closer to what these creatures actually are. And what is that, Doctor? An extremophile of unimaginable size and capabilities. Something that might truly be invulnerable to any weapon that we currently possess. Something that might as well be considered to be a god from our perspective. That's a little much, isn't it? Describing these things as godlike? They behave like animals. The ones we see behave like limbs of a central body, striking out at what it sees as a threat. The consciousness that guides those limbs, we have yet to understand or in many cases even consider. Although anyone who listened to the Richards recordings heard that consciousness speak directly to us. We have underestimated the intelligence of the things we are at war with from day one. There was no sign that Dr. Leeds had been infected, and for the life of me, I have no idea when it could have happened. I do believe that it was a direct retaliation for the attack on the birthing site in Texas. 4 research sites were hit on the night of the 23rd, and I don't think for 1 second that that was an accident. Their first victim was a doctor, correct? If they truly absorbed the memories of people as well as our bodies, then they would have known exactly what we were doing. The thing is, unless the infection time has sped up, Dr. Leeds must have been infected for some time, and like the former Dr. Richards, there must have been another mind in control of his body, and masking the changes that were taking place, even to people who were working with him on a daily basis. This leads me to believe that we had been infiltrated for a while, and that perhaps we were not the only division that had been. In spite of what is stated at the end of Dr. Richards' recording, I don't think the enemy has underestimated us, or at the very least, it isn't taking any chances. I believe that is how the premature breaches in the firewall are happening. I think the enemy has had spies on our side the entire time, likely even before the first attack took place. But whether they have all the information on us that they need, or we crossed a line by disturbing those birthing areas, I think the ruse is up. It's hard to describe how it all transpired with Dr. Leeds that night, but I think that's been a common sentiment among many ever since we learned that these things existed. I was in my office, which oversees the main research floor. Dr. Leeds was in the main laboratory with 4 other researchers. I witnessed the change take place. I saw it with my own eyes, and it still doesn't make sense to me. There was no transfiguration, no Hollywood-esque morphing of Dr. Leeds' human form into something else. It was more like an illusion had been turned off. One minute, Dr. Leeds was there, and the next there was a barely humanoid shape standing where he was. A shape that was covered in eyes and teeth. A shape that formed limbs seemingly at will and began tearing apart the other men and women that were in the lab. I activated the lockdown and incinerator emergency safeguards and sounded for an evacuation of the facility. 4 of us boarded the evac chopper and we were airborne within minutes. As we ran for the evac point, I noticed that the facility was surrounded with what looked like normal people, with the exception that their eyes shined like an animal's at night, and they were whispering to us in a language that I couldn't understand. They were sending us a message, I think. I don't know if the incinerator killed that thing. It's programmed for a 5-minute burn. The steel shutters that would have fallen over the windows may have been enough to trap the thing that had been Dr. Leeds, but I don't know if 5 minutes at 800 degrees Celsius was enough to kill it. It would have been more than enough to destroy the samples we had if anything had gone wrong with them, which is what they were designed for. But a human-sized being packed with over 30 trillion cells? I don't know. I know that there is a drone keeping an eye on the facility, and that there has been no apparent movement since the night of the attack. So maybe we got one. One. In exchange for 4 researchers that were the top of their respective fields, an entire research facility, the sample we were studying, and most of the notes that had been made during our analyzation of said sample. But maybe we killed one of them. Maybe. Do you see the folly in calling this a war? Because I'm starting to. We have maybe, 10, 15 confirmed kills in the last 7 months? How many have died to these monsters in contrast? 100 million in the US alone, maybe? What about worldwide so far? 300 million? The smaller countries which fell almost instantly. Maybe the worldwide total is closer to 500 million. In 7 months? Even if my math is a little off, that's the extinction of the entire human race in 16, 20 years? Unless we magically come up with a way to effectively destroy them. And it would have to be a quick way, too, because they add to their numbers every day, and now we know they are actively breeding in the wild. But we don't have time to do that, do we? I'd love to say that we could come up with a way to detect any other infiltrators that might already be among us, but we don't have time for that either. That's the issue, Agent. We don't have time. If we had 100 years to prepare for this conflict, then maybe, we could have come up with something as an effective counter against this threat. But the truth is, this is an enemy we were never prepared to fight. It's an enemy we don't even fully understand. But we do our research, we write our papers, we come up with possible countermeasures, even though in the back of our minds we know the truth. This isn't a war, Agent Miller. It's an extermination. We call it a war because we can't accept that. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a 7-year-old bottle of whiskey waiting for me in my quarters. Dr. Collins, we aren't done here. I am, Agent Miller. No offense, sir, but we can't win. It's a joke to think that we ever could. Do you know there are reports of people worshipping these things? Seeking them out and either feeding themselves to the monsters or imbibing some of that viscous fluid, infecting themselves on purpose? Did you hear about the soldier who turned a gun on his own platoon, shouting that the old gods have arisen, that they were a harbinger of something greater to come? What's been our best move so far, Agent? Lighting half of North America on fire? Is that all we had? Now, you can restrain me, I am aware. You can handcuff me to this table, and we can go over every little minute detail of that thing butchering my colleagues. We can talk about whatever theories I may have left. But in reality, it will all amount to the same. We're fucked. Can I go now? Yes, Dr. Collins. You may go.
Recording ends. International Coalition Report. Final analysis and recommendations by Special Agent Charles Miller. February 12th, 2027.
The following report is the culmination of over a year of comprehensive research, including interviews with survivors, going over combat reports, viewing footage of the enemy in action, and extensive consultations with government researchers. As the appointed special agent in charge of investigating the war against the Shoggoth and the possibility of having to resort to Operation Glass, I respectfully submit this final analysis and recommendation. The entities known as the Shoggoth present what I have come to believe to be an insurmountable threat to humanity. According to eyewitness accounts and analysis of physical evidence, these entities exhibit extraordinary resilience and regenerative capacities. Traditional military tactics and weapons have proven largely ineffective against them. Combine that with their growing numbers and continued evolution, not to mention the cunning that they have exhibited, I believe that this is a foe that cannot be overcome. In the past year and a half, our efforts to contain and combat the Shoggoth have yielded minimal success. Despite our best strategies and significant resource mobilization, we have only confirmed 10 to 20 kills at best. In stark contrast, the death toll inflicted by these entities is catastrophic, with estimates reaching up to nearly 200 million in the United States alone of people who are either missing or confirmed dead, although this number cannot be verified, and potentially 700 million worldwide. The psychological toll on both civilians and military personnel has been profound. Reports of individuals turning to worship these entities or deliberately infecting themselves with the Shoggoth's fluid highlight the collapse of morale and societal norms. Cases of soldiers turning against their comrades, driven by delusional beliefs in the Shoggoth's supposed divinity, are increasing, further underscoring the gravity of the situation. Through meticulous examination of the data and first-hand accounts, it has become painfully clear that framing our struggle against the Shoggoth as a war is fundamentally flawed. Our attempts to combat the Shoggoth head-on have resulted in devastating losses and have only served to delay the inevitable. Given the above findings, it is with a heavy heart that I must recommend the immediate implementation of Project Glass. This initiative, though extreme, represents our last and only viable option to possibly destroy these creatures, or at the very least, trap them in an inhospitable world. It is a decision born out of desperation and stark realization that our conventional approaches have failed. This report does not come to its conclusion lightly. The sacrifices made by countless individuals in the pursuit of understanding and combating this threat should not be forgotten. It is my sincere hope that Project Glass will allow humanity to greet our extinction with a measure of grace and dignity. Special Agent Charles Miller, Operation Glass, Final Report.
Operation Report from General William Fargo, July 23rd, 2028.
This is General William Fargo, head of Operation Glass, and one of the 18 launch code holders in the United States, and one of 160 code holders worldwide. I will be brief in my report, as I'm not even sure who will be reading this right now. At precisely 0600 on July 25th, I will join 160 of my comrades in the largest mass murder in the history of this planet. Every country with nuclear launch capabilities will perform a synchronized launch, firing every nuclear missile that mankind has at its disposal. The targets will not matter on the whole, as long as we hit every landmass on the planet. The hope is that, seeing as Project Glass was only known to the International Committee and a few select individuals operating in the field, that the enemy has not been able to gain knowledge of it through infiltration. If this is the case, the initial launch will take them completely by surprise. While we believe that the enemy will be able to survive nuclear fallout due to their cells being able to repair themselves at such a rate that radiation likely will not be able to irreparably damage them. However, without knowledge of the launch, we do believe that many of the enemy will be caught in the blast zones, and that there is a very good chance that the heat produced at the impact and direct surrounding area will be enough to kill the Shoggoth caught within them. While only brief, we have reason to think that the temperatures exceeding that of the sun that are produced within the center of each explosion will be more than enough to completely obliterate anything within the direct blast radius. Of course, we are not naive enough to believe that we will be able to destroy the enemy with this simultaneous launch. However, we will accomplish two things. 1. We will destroy a large portion of the enemy, as the nuclear arsenal of humanity combined far exceeds what many may think. 2. While some of the creatures will undoubtedly survive, we will render this planet a dead world. There will be nothing for them to feed on left on the surface, nothing that will grow anytime soon. And with luck, we will blast enough dust and debris into the atmosphere to cause a lasting nuclear winter. Over the past 6 months, we have evacuated as many people as we could into bomb shelters scattered around what territory we still control. While these shelters will not last indefinitely, they should at least allow many within them to live out the rest of their natural lives barring sickness. Maybe those who are going underground have the belief that one day their great-grandchildren will be able to reclaim the surface once the radiation levels drop. Maybe that will be the case. Maybe the shelters will outlast even the most generous estimations. It's possible, however unlikely that it may be. If anyone is reading this, I want you to know that this decision was not made callously. The International Committee initially voted down Project Glass after Special Agent Charles Miller gave his final recommendation, in spite of the tireless efforts he had put in researching the viability of a sustained war against the enemy. I understood their reticence then, just as I do now. So, for nearly a year and a half since that vote took place, we have continued the war. During that time, area controlled in the United States has dwindled, as the enemy has advanced relentlessly. Arizona, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana mark the new eastern edge of territory under our control. As many of you know, it is the same situation worldwide. Island nations have fallen completely. Much of mainland Europe has been taken by the enemy. It is estimated that half of South America, along with Russia and China, are also no longer occupied by humans. Only the northern parts of Africa can still be considered under the International Alliance's control, and a couple of areas landlocked in the Middle East. The casualties that humanity has sustained over the last 3 years are unimaginable, and an accurate number of those we have lost to the Shoggoth will never be known. I want you to know that we fought the good fight, but we lost. In truth, I don't know if we ever had a chance of winning. This is an enemy that defies everything we knew about biological life, and there just wasn't enough time to learn enough about them to create an effective means of fighting them. Through the single recording we have of this entity speaking, we know that they claim to be the only pure life form, that they are the original inhabitants of this planet. Over the last 3 years, some have even come to see them as gods. But I don't see any of that. When I look at these abominations, I see parasites at best, and cancer at worst. A cancer that was created in a laboratory by beings that are even farther beyond our realm of understanding. A cancer that had been sitting in a kind of stasis for millions of years and then was awakened by the reckless and selfish ambitions of one scientist. This cancer then grew right beneath our feet, absorbing the minds of its unknowing victims, learning about us and our world before launching an attack that we had no hope of recovering from. If we were to continue this war, there is not a single doubt that every single member of the human race would eventually be rolled over and devoured by this unceasing force. Either that, or our numbers will be diminished to the point where extinction is all but inevitable even without their presence. The International Committee has opted against this outcome. We have decided that humanity will exit this planet on our own terms, and by doing so, hopefully we will deny this cancer the world that it so craves. The abominations that survive Operation Glass will likely retreat into the oceans, but there is only so much life there to sustain them, and with luck, global temperatures will plummet once we black out the sky. Maybe these masters that the Richards thing spoke of still exist somewhere down there, and the two groups will destroy each other in a war over diminishing resources. Or perhaps there is something even worse living down there in the depths. Something that will not take kindly to the Shoggoth infringing on its territory. Fanciful thinking, perhaps, but it's possible. After all, if someone had told me that something like the Shoggoth existed 5 years ago, I would have called them insane. So who knows what may still reside in the unexplored corners of the world. Yet, none of that really matters in the grand scheme of things. Not for us, anyway. Humanity's time has come to an end, but instead of falling to the enemy, we choose to show this enemy the extent at which we are willing to go to try and take them with us. To all those who are reading this, know that humanity will die with pride. We will go out on our terms. We will not submit or surrender. We will show these abominations the power of the atom. We will not go gently into that good night. General William Fargo, July 23rd, 2028. Thank you for joining us here at Nightmares Incorporated, and we hope to see you again next time when we bring you another original story. Until then, sweet dreams.